Welcome, everybody. Thank you for joining us this evening. The Sashbear Foundation, if you don't know, is a Canadian charity recognized nationally and internationally as a leading voice for families impacted by emotion dysregulation, suicidality, and related mental health challenges. You may know us for the Family Connections program, which we provide across Canada, for these expert education series presentations, or for our annual Sashbear Awareness Walk held every spring in cities across Canada, or for our many other activities, raising awareness for mental health and providing skills and hope for families in communities across Canada and around the world. You can go to our website and follow us on social media to learn more and see how we are making waves across Canada and internationally each and every day. As I mentioned, Sashbear is a registered Canadian charity, and as a charity, we depend on donations for much of the funding to do our work. Even a small monthly donation can help us with so much that we can provide to families. And I would now like to introduce our guest presenter for tonight, Dr. Shireen Rizvi. Dr. Rizvi, PhD, is the professor of psychiatry and behavioral sciences at Montefiore Einstein Medical Center in New York, where she serves as the director of psychology training and the director of DBT services and research. Dr. Rizvi earned her doctorate under the mentorship of Marsha Linehan, who created DBT, of course. She has received extensive grant funding and published dozens of research papers. She's board certified in cognitive and behavioral therapies and dialectical behavior therapy. And her mission is to get DBT tools, dialectical behavior therapy tools, to as many people as possible. And at that point, I want to put in a plug for her book, if you can see it. This has just been published. It is called Real Skills for Real Life. And it's absolutely wonderful. She has an incredible gift for making these skills very accessible to those of us who don't have a clinical background and want to be able to use them in our everyday life. So we are so pleased that she is here to join us tonight. I will now turn the floor over to you, Dr. Rizvi. Thank you for being with us.
Thank you. And thank you so much for having me. And okay, great. I think the topic for today is recognizing that we're in a period of time that many people find to be highly stressful and for various reasons. And how can we use DBT skills to help us cope with this difficult season and not only cope with, but perhaps even find more joy, pleasure, and satisfaction with the holiday season. So that's why we're talking about surviving and thriving in the holiday season. I went and I looked for a few, I feel like every time I see the news or see something posted, it's all about stress, 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 how we should feel stressed around this time of year. So I looked for a few headlines that seem to indicate that there's actually data that suggests that for a lot of people, this is a period of higher stress than usual. And of course, that stress can be financial, it can be social or emotional. And I thought that this was important and interesting, which is that NAMI reports that 64% of people with an existing mental illness report that the holidays make their conditions worse. So I think what makes it even harder, perhaps, is that we're in this period of time that everybody, or socially, culturally, we're meant to believe is joyous and nonstop parties and fun and love. And so when we juxtapose that cultural image of what the holiday season is supposed to be with the fact that we're stressed and ourselves or our loved ones with mental health problems feeling worse than usual, feeling more depressed, that compounds the difficulty, I think. So what can we do? Marsha Linehan, my mentor, came up with this idea that actually whenever there's a problem, it's easy to get overwhelmed, hopeless, and passive. And it's important to remember that actually we always have choices, even if those choices are difficult. So when life presents you with problems, what are your options? And if you actually think about it, you can see that you always have 4 choices available to you. So you could solve the problem that creates stress. So, for example, imagine that you are feeling sad and lonely because your relationships are not what you want them to be, especially at this time around the holidays. Solve the problem that creates stress could be, I got to go make more friends. I got to do more social events. I got to put myself out there. Or I got to work on the relationships that I have to make them more meaningful in the way I want them to be. That would be solving the problem. And so, therefore, if I solve the problem, I won't feel so sad and lonely anymore. It could be that you work to feel better about the problem. So you could say to yourself, in some ways, this is like a cognitive reframe. Well, the fact that I feel sad and lonely about relationships is a sign that people and connection and relationships are important to me and of value to me. And maybe if I realize that and sit with this, that actually makes me feel better about my situation because I know that it's a sign that I care. Okay. A third option would be to accept the fact that you have problems, the fact that you have stress, the fact that your relationships are not what you want them to be right now, and just go down the acceptance route without necessarily trying to change them. And the fourth option, which we never want to forget, is to stay miserable. And in fact, we could say stay miserable or make things worse. And the reason that we think about this as an option is to highlight that often we choose this. Okay. And I'm not saying that we do it necessarily intentionally, nor do we do it because we like suffering, and we do it anyway. So we often choose the stay miserable. But if I know that I'm choosing stay miserable when in fact there are other options available to me, that gives me also a sense of agency. It could be that I say, you know what, I'm feeling really down tonight. I'm feeling really sad and lonely, and I'm going to stay miserable and I'm going to just, feel bad about this. Or I can say, well, I'm feeling really sad and lonely tonight. I don't want to feel miserable. What else can I do? And then I look to these three other options for me. Now, the dialectical behavior skills, you all know probably. There's a wonderful picture of Marcia. She developed these. This is a group for whom I don't really have to spend time talking about what the skills are. I will say that although DBT skills were originally designed for the comprehensive treatment that was developed for individuals who meet criteria for borderline personality disorder and are suicidal or self-injurious, the treatment has in fact been used, disseminated for all sorts of mental health problems, for all sorts of settings, for people that don't have mental health problems, in schools, in prisons, in hospitals. Really, there's so many different settings and contexts in which DBT skills have been taught. And so a lot of the studies have looked at not DBT for borderline personality disorder, but DBT skills for other mental health problems. And the majority of these studies have found that DBT skills improve mental health problems. So you all probably know that already. You're here because you want to learn more about the skills. Here, I'm going to return to some of these resources later, but I just wanted to highlight a few things. So for those of you that don't know, these two, I don't know if you can see my cursor, but these two are the skills training manuals that are part of the comprehensive treatment that Marcia developed. There is a new edition of the manuals that just came out a few months ago. It's called the revised edition. I want to highlight that there are no new skills. So if you still, these are in green, if you still have the books that are in blue, the number of skills and the exact skills have not changed. This, of course, is the manual, skills training manual for adolescents. They are working, my understanding is they're working on an update as well, but I think it's not immediate that's coming out. This is the book that I just wrote, which I'll tell you a little bit more about later. These are the YouTube videos that we have on our channel. It's DBTRU at YouTube. You can see all the skills that I'm teaching today also have a video on our channel. So if you liked the sound of any of these skills and you want to learn more, you can go to one of those videos. What is important to know about the skills modules also is that they are meant to be dialectically balanced. Now, the primary dialectic in dialectical behavior therapy is between acceptance and change. The one of the major tenets is, everything is perfect as it is, and everything needs to change, or you are perfect as you are and you need to do better and try harder. I am perfect as I am and I need to do better and try harder. So we are constantly working to balance acceptance and change within the treatment. The skills themselves balance acceptance and change because some of the skills are very change oriented. I have an emotion I want to change. What do I do? You can try opposite action. But there are also skills that are acceptance oriented. I have an emotion I don't like. I can practice mindfulness of emotions. And all of this gives people a range of responses to scenarios and different problems. This came up actually in a team that I'm on right now, which is, people saying something, well, sometimes that's confusing because sometimes you just want to be given one answer for what to do. If you have an emotion you don't like, should you change it or should you accept it? And I think it makes a lot of sense that we all want that answer and we want to be told what to do. DBT won't tell you one way to do things. That I think can be frustrating at times to people, but more instead to say we actually can do many different things. And maybe what we need to keep in mind is what's most effective in this particular situation. Is it most effective for me to work on changing my emotion, or is it most effective for me to sit with my emotion? And that is going to really depend. There's so many factors that are going to influence whether I think I should change it or whether I should accept it. And if you know all the skills, and if you've been practicing the skills, you can practice any one of these things. And I guarantee that with practice of these skills, you will start to feel better, whether it's because you solved the problem and changed how you were feeling, or because you realize that emotions are not so scary and dangerous, for example. So what can we do? Well, let's say for the rest of the night, for the rest of this hour anyway, we're going to cross off Stamer's role and we're going to focus on these top 5-ish skills of the day. So let's talk about mindfulness. Now, I'm guessing most of you are familiar with mindfulness. Perhaps you're familiar with mindfulness in DBT. I'd like to remind people that when we talk about mindfulness in dialectical behavior therapy, we are not necessarily talking about meditation. A lot of people think of mindfulness and meditation as synonymous. And I have had this when I have clients and I say, have you tried mindfulness, or I want to teach you mindfulness, and they roll their eyes and they say, I'm not sitting on a cushion for 45 minutes. And I can appreciate that because I think that's really hard and not necessarily for everybody, or certainly not for everybody at the moment in their lives that they're in. So what we're teaching people in DBT is mindfulness. And what mindfulness has to do with is being more present in this one moment. So the overarching idea is that when we are experiencing suffering, most of the time that we're suffering, most of the time when we're stressed, it's because we are thinking about something that could happen in the future, or we're thinking about something that has already happened. And so that when we remove the thoughts about the future, the thoughts about the past, and we're only in this moment, our suffering will go down. It might not necessarily go away because often we're in painful moments. So I don't want to say, oh, if you're mindful, you're never going to have any pain. Not true. But if you're mindful of this one moment and you work on letting go of the future oriented thoughts, and you work on letting go of the past oriented thoughts, and just be in this moment, you may find this one moment feels easier to tolerate, less painful, and is not as scary. And you might even find that if you fully put your attention on this one moment, you can find joy in this moment. How does this relate to stressors the stress of the season. So one skill that we could talk about as related to mindfulness is one of my favorites, which is mindfulness of current emotions. Now, I told you what we think about it as mindfulness in DBT. This is a quote from Jon Kabat-Zinn that is longstanding quote about mindfulness, which it relates to the DBT skills of mindfulness, which is paying attention on purpose in the present moment, non-judgmentally. That encapsulates mindfulness and what we're trying to do in mindfulness and DBT. Mindfulness then can be applied to any object of focus. So often when we teach mindfulness, we say, focus on your breath and just observe your breath coming in and out. It could be mindfulness of thoughts. Just notice the thoughts that are going through your mind. It could be mindfulness of sounds. Just notice in this moment, what do you hear? And it can be applied to what you're feeling right now, which is current emotions, right? So this skill is basically teaching you to surf your emotions like a wave, to just sit. In fact, I might invite you to do this right now, to just sit and notice where in your body, what do you feel in your body? Now, you might not be feeling any particular emotion or any strong emotion right now, which is fine. But if you are, what do you notice? Do you notice your heart rate as either slower than usual or faster than usual? Do you notice tension in any particular parts of your body? Do you notice tenseness in any particular part of your body? Just notice that. And without trying to change or modify, just see if you can experience it. One of the dialectical tenets is that the only constant is change. So when we experience an emotion that we don't like, we often feel, let's say we're feeling sad and lonely, we often have thoughts, I'll never not feel this way, or I'm going to feel this way forever, or this is unbearable. And instead, if we just sit and observe and notice what it is that we're feeling without acting on it, without trying to suppress it, but also without adding to it with all those thoughts, we will notice its natural wave, meaning that it might increase in intensity and in sensations, and it might peak and crest, but then it actually will change. It will go down. It will diminish in intensity. And we can just observe our emotions that way. We have to remember when we're doing that, you are not your emotion, right? So even if you feel sad, you are not sadness. You are experiencing sadness in your body. And you have to remember that no emotion lasts forever. Have any of you had an emotion that lasts forever? No, you haven't. I'll answer that question for you. So no emotion lasts forever. The issue is that emotions tend to feel like they last a really long time. Part of that is because we're holding on to it and we're doing things that actually refire the same emotion over and over again. So when we just practice mindfulness of current emotions, we might even find that emotions last shorter than we think. One of my favorite things to say to myself when I'm practicing mindfulness of current emotions is just to say to myself, it's okay to feel this. It's okay to feel this. And just notice, what effect does that have? So when you find yourself stressed, did I buy enough presents? I haven't bought enough presents. I have to see this family member that I'm really avoiding, or I'm worried that my family will fight the whole time. When you find yourself getting angry, sad, anxious about these things that might be upcoming, what would happen if you just paused, noticed how you were feeling it in your body, and said to yourself, it's okay to feel this? That would be the practice of mindfulness of current emotions, and I want you to give it a try. All right, that's skill number 1. Well, I think the issue is what develops over the course of many people's lives. And I think you see this in OCD and you see this in PTSD or trauma, but it's not unique to these diagnoses. What you see in people's lives is avoidance of emotion, what Marcia has called, emotion phobia. I'm afraid of feeling an emotion because if I feel an emotion, I'm going to fall into an abyss and I won't be able to get out, is the feeling. Mindfulness of current emotions then is kind of like a form of exposure, right? You're saying to yourself, oh, I can just experience this emotion and not do anything, right? And just notice it coming and going without acting on it. Are there people that I would say shouldn't do that? No, because we all need to learn how to sit and notice our emotions. However, if somebody doesn't have any other skills and when they feel an emotion, there is like a one-to-one correlation between feeling an emotion and doing something really disruptive or dangerous, then you want to practice other skills until, so that you can experience an emotion without immediately acting on it in an impulsive way. Well, I think I can answer it a couple different ways because I do think that mindfulness is like a muscle and it takes time to develop that muscle and strengthen that muscle. And so if you are somebody that does not practice mindfulness very often and you're new to it, and suddenly somebody says, oh, be more mindful, focus on this one moment, it's going to feel challenging to do that when you're so used to being in your head, thinking about the future, thinking about the past, and having a hard time sitting still in this one moment. So yes, it is going to get easier with more practice. How long? I think it's going to vary, and don't let that scare you from practicing it and trying it, because even seconds of a mindful experience is going to help you. You're going to notice something different. The other way I would answer that question, how long does it take to work, is related to emotions in particular. So, when I teach this skill, I ask people, how long do you think emotions last? And people will say hours, days, my whole life. And what we say, well, actually, from an emotion science point of view, emotions last a couple of minutes. Why don't they feel that way? Because we're having the initial emotional reaction, but then instead of letting it do this wave, we're doing something else. We're intervening. We're trying to suppress it, block it, or we're acting on urges consistent with it, which keep it going. So if we start to practice mindfulness of current emotions and just observe our emotions coming and going, we may find that our experience of emotions are we may find that we begin to experience emotions themselves as shorter in duration. So my second of 5 skills is participate. And participate is a mindfulness skill. If you're familiar with DBT, you know that there are 7 mindfulness skills: wise mind, observe, describe, participate, non-judgmentally, one mindfully, and effectively. So I could have pulled out any one of those 7 and made it relatable for this topic and for this audience. But I chose to focus on this skill of participate because I think that this is a critical skill for this period of time. And what participate is, just to jump to this third point here, participate means entering fully in to the experience of this moment of whatever you're doing right now. So it could mean fully participating in listening to this lecture. Okay, put down that phone, turn off the TV, close all the other windows on your computer and just sit and watch the screen and listen. Right? That would be participate in this moment. And when you get distracted thinking about something else, or when you want to pop up a window and do some shopping, notice that and let it go and bring your attention back to fully participating in this, right? I could say, how do I fully participate in my teaching right now? Well, I have to let go of the distraction that my son is making a lot of noise downstairs and worry about that. So I'm going to do that, and I'm going to focus on the slides in front of me and engage myself more, like put my full body into it. You see me moving around, I can't help it. But that's like participate, right? To fully enter into the experience. What gets in the way of participate? Worry, self-consciousness, judgment, right? All of these things get in the way of fully being in the moment. So when we think about holidays coming up, we think about days with family or dinner with family and friends or dinner by ourselves. What gets in the way of us being just one in that moment? And how do we refocus our attention over and over again to this one moment, this one activity? That's the skill of participate. And when we do that, we open ourselves up more to the experience of joy and pleasure. Okay. So this is just a graphic from one of the pages in our book where we talk about the difference between not participating and participating. So not participating would be going for a walk outside, but spending the whole time ruminating, right? Versus participating would be going for a walk outside and taking in all of your sensory experiences while you're walking and refocusing your attention over and over again to the sensory experiences of this moment. The next skill that I'm going to come to is an interpersonal effectiveness skill. So a lot of the stress and strain of holiday times are related to interactions with others, fear about how things are going with others or might go with others, worry that things are going to go very badly, other people behaving badly, perhaps. And so wanted to remind you that there are a whole host of interpersonal effectiveness skills in DBT. All of them are designed to help us be more effective with other people. And that means a wide variety of things. But centrally, the skills are focused on how do you interact with people in skillful, effective ways when you want to ask for something or when you want to say no to something. And when you want to ask for something, it could be, something like, could you loan me some money? Or could you give me a ride somewhere? It could also be, I would like for you to respect my opinion about this, or I would like for you to not start arguments over dinner, right? So they could be a range of things that we're asking people or thinking about. What interpersonal effectiveness skills often require, or being effective interpersonally often requires, and this is what I think gets in our way a lot of the time, is to think about this ahead of time and to be planful. When we are not interpersonally effective, it's often because we're behaving impulsively, we're lashing out at somebody, or we're being reactive in ways that we didn't plan for ahead of time. So why I want to teach then the DEARMAN skill, which is the skill for asking for something or for saying no to something effectively, is because it is a skill that can come in very handy when interacting with all sorts of people that you'll interact with over the next few weeks. It improves the likelihood of being effective. So this skill is designed for, as I've said already, when you want to ask for something or want to say no. And importantly, it's also for when the other person can give you what you want. And I say that because we often feel like we're ineffective when we ask for something and we don't get it. But not getting something isn't necessarily a sign that we weren't skillful. Sometimes we can ask for things and we can't get it for reasons that have nothing to do with our skill level. The other person can't give it to us. You wouldn't ask a child to loan you $200. They're not gonna, they don't have it. They're not gonna give it to you. You could be as skillful as possible in making that request and you're still not gonna get it. In the same way, you can be really skillful in making a request, but the environment is too powerful. And that could be, for example, saying, well, I want to ask my grandfather to be more sensitive to my sexual and gender identity, I think that is a very reasonable thing to ask your grandfather about. And uh, there will be challenges involved. Your grandfather, let's say elderly, set in their ways, not used to change, not used to being asked to do things differently, might have some problems and some difficulty. That doesn't mean don't ask. It means ask and be flexible and remain true to your values and remain true to being effective. What is effective in this moment is the constant question. So how do you ask people for something that you want? You use DEARMAN, and DEARMAN is an acronym. If you are familiar at all with DBT, you know that there are a million acronyms in it. Acronyms, the purpose of acronyms is to help you remember the steps. That's it. So sometimes you hear people who say they don't like this acronym. That's okay. We just want you to remember what the steps are in asking for something. So DEARMAN, each letter stands for something. D stands for describe. Describe means just describe the situation that is prompting this request, just the facts. Describe the situation that's prompting this request, just the facts. Then E stands for express. Express your thoughts and opinions about the situation using I statements. So what's an example of something that might come up at holiday times? It's you want some more help in the dinner that you're putting on for family. So describe could be, I am hosting this dinner at my house like I have for the past 4 years. Express could be, I have lately been feeling more stressed and tired about putting the whole meal together myself. A is assert. Very explicitly and specifically ask for what you want or state what you want. Now, this is important because lots of times what we do is we do just the D and E or just the E. So you call your sister and you say, I'm really stressed and tired doing this whole dinner by myself. And you leave it like that without anything else. And then you get mad because your sister doesn't volunteer to help. Instead, what we want is to learn how to more directly communicate what it is we're looking for. So in this case, it could be saying, I was wondering if you'd be willing to make 2 dishes to bring to dinner this year, right? Very explicit. Or maybe it's, I'm wondering if you'd be willing to come a couple hours early so that you could help me. A very explicit ask. This is, if you learn nothing else about DEARMAN, this is probably what I want you to take away from this, is how important it is to assert directly what it is that you're looking for and want. Reinforce says, reinforce the ask. Let the other person know ahead of time what good things will come their way, what reward they'll get if they give in to agree to your request. So I would like for you to come a couple hours early and help me with dinner. I think this will make the dinner go so much more smoothly, and I will really enjoy spending the time with you as well, right? It could be saying as simple as, I really appreciate it, as a reinforce. That's another one if you get worried that you can't think of a really strong reinforcer. It could be, when you're asking for something, you could say something like, I'll buy you coffee next time I see you. You just have to make sure if you do something like that, you follow through, because otherwise the person will learn that you're not reliable with what it is you say you'll do for them. Okay, that's DEAR. The DEAR is kind of like what you say in the asking for something. The MAN piece of DEARMAN is more related to kind of how you say it or what to do in response to other person's reaction to your request. M stands for staying mindful. This has to do with if the person comes back at you, they criticize you for making the request, or maybe they turn the tables on you and they ask something of you, or emotions show up. So, you ask your sister to come a couple hours early and she says, I'm always helping you and you never help me, right? Or I don't know if I can, I have so many things to do that day too. So here, what would staying mindful look like? It's not getting caught up in those other things, like your entire history of who's done more for whom, or about who has more things on their plate, which can be a very easy argument to get into with siblings, I have found. Instead, staying mindful is to just repeat maybe your objective, your assert. I totally get that. I hear you on that. And I would so appreciate it if you could come a couple hours early and help me with this dinner, right? Or I hear what you're saying. That's a problem for another day. On this day, could you please come a couple hours early? I would so appreciate it, right? So you're staying mindful on your objective. The other thing you want to do when you're asking for something throughout is to appear confident, is to, and it says appear, not be confident, because for a lot of people, it's really hard to ask for things. But what do you think happens if you ask for something and you're using a small voice tone and you're not making eye contact and you're kind of hedging? It's going to decrease your effectiveness and decrease the likelihood that the other person is going to think that this is important and something that they should do. So as much as this is true for your culture and context of the situation you're in, you want to make eye contact, you want to use a confident voice tone, you want to make it sound as though this is something you believe in and that you know that this is a reasonable request. And then negotiate, the N in DEARMAN is really kind of like, well, when all else fails, if the person is not giving in to your request, you don't just run away and say, okay, well, never mind. You look for opportunities to negotiate. So I hear you, you're saying you don't really have the time to spare. Is there any time you can come over early and help, even if it's an hour? Or could you make something in advance and drop it off the day before, right? So you're negotiating. Your ask is still that you want some help, but you're negotiating what the directness of your, what the specific of your ask is. The turn the tables as a part of this can always be something that you say as well, which is, okay, we're stuck here because I'm asking for this help that I feel like I need, and you're saying you can't give me the help that I need. What do you think we should do? Right? And that's part of negotiate too. While you're staying calm and you're staying focused on what your objective is, you're saying, do you have any ideas about what we could do to solve this problem? That's called turn the tables, and it's part of negotiate. I get this response every single time I teach it, or almost every single time I teach it. So it does make me wonder, is it manipulation? Like Marcia would actually write, if you read Marcia's book, she talks about manipulation in a different context. People with borderline personality disorder are often called manipulative. And Marcia's response to that is that they're not manipulative, because if you look up what manipulated or manipulative means in the dictionary, it infers that somebody is successful at getting someone else to do what they want. And people with borderline personality disorder often are unsuccessful at getting people to do what they want. So, to be truly nuanced about this, I would say, yeah, in some ways we are learning to manipulate the situation. And I am saying that in a non-judgmental way, that we actually are constantly looking to manipulate our environment. If we're just thinking about the word manipulate, changing the environment to be more tolerable, right? To be more enjoyable, to be more in line with the things that we're looking for. So yes, but I think the question is more like, this sounds like gimmicky, or like I'm a slick salesperson or something, like this feels uncomfortable. And I would say, yes, it does feel uncomfortable when you first start to do it, because it feels so foreign if you have not learned how to do this before. This is something that was really hard for me to learn how to do without sounding stiff, without sounding um, just stiff, really, where I felt like I couldn't ask this in a conversational way. So it took practice. And when you start to do it and you start to infuse your own like personality and mannerisms into it as you get more comfortable, you realize that actually this is what successful people do. If you look at people that you admire in terms of how they interact with other people, what makes them so easy to be around, what makes them get the things that they want, they are often, they might not be aware that they're doing this, but they're often doing aspects of this. And so this is what it's like, how to be successful with other people. Try this. And it might feel weird at first, and keep at it. All right. So the two last skills are both actually in the category of skills called distress tolerance. And distress tolerance skills in DBT are further subdivided into two categories. One is called crisis survival. Crisis survival skills are about how to get through difficult times, and we use the word crises here, but we could say difficult times, whatever floats your boat. How to get through difficult times in effective ways without doing anything to make the situation worse. Okay, so what this means is often when we're in crisis, or often when we're, overcome, flooded with emotional intensity, we behave in ineffective ways. We do something impulsive, or we yell and scream at someone, or we avoid and we say, forget it, I'm not even going to that dinner, or we do things like that, right? So instead, what we are trying to teach people with crisis survival skills is to say crises are going to happen. We can't control that all the time. You're going to feel intensely. We can't stop that from happening. When that happens, what can you do to get through it without doing anything to make the situation worse? Now, going back to like one of my earlier slides, crisis survival is not about solving the problem. It's about getting through. Okay, getting through effectively. So this is important because, people will say, well, I did crisis survival, but it didn't work. And you say, well, why didn't it work? And they say, well, my mother is still, mad at me. That is not the measure of whether crisis survival worked. The measure is, did you get through without doing what you normally do, right? Your impulsive behaviors. So there's skills for tolerating painful events and emotions when you cannot make things better right now. There are actually a number of different crisis survival skills, and you could go to any one of those resources, including, probably easiest to go to would be the YouTube channel with a lot of different crisis survival skills. The one that I wanted to talk to you briefly about tonight is the distract skill. Now, the distract skill in DBT teaches people how to distract away from something that is distressing you, but distract in an effective way. Everybody on this call probably knows how to distract, and we probably know how to distract sometimes in ineffective ways, right? We get stressed out and we drink, or we use a substance, or we vape, or we go to bed and pull the covers over our head and pretend the world doesn't exist, or we do something impulsive, right? So instead, when we are distressed and we want to take a moment to distract, we want to think about how do we do that in effective ways that don't harm us and don't harm others, and also teach us that we don't need to go to those other behaviors to get through something. We can learn how to do something new. Again, another acronym here, the distract skills. These are pretty self-explanatory, so I don't even think I have to go through all of them individually. It's an acronym, though, to remind yourself that there are loads of things that you can do when you're distressed and you want to distract effectively. You can throw yourself into, with the skill of participate, another activity. Whatever that activity is, you can throw yourself into it wholeheartedly. Contributing has to do with doing something nice for somebody else. So you can actually distract away from your crisis by sending a friend that you haven't spoken to in a long time an email or a text and just say, I'm thinking of you. Your friendship is really important to me. I hope you're doing well. That actually takes the focus off of you for a moment and helps you get through the stress. It could, of course, be doing something more like volunteering or something, but it could just be moments of contributing to making somebody else's life better in this moment. Comparisons, if this isn't obvious, it's about comparing your situation, no matter how awful it seems, to something else that is worse as a way of helping you put things into context. Some people don't like that. And I will say it is sometimes helpful for people, including myself, to say, this feels really bad, but at least I'm not, in this war-torn country, or at least I have access to food, or at least I have my health, right? So telling myself that actually helps put things in context for me and helps me get through the crisis a little bit better. Distracting with emotions means to distract with an emotion that is opposite or different than what you're feeling right now. So if I'm feeling really angry, I might put on a comedy or watch a comic video on YouTube or something. If I'm feeling really sad or down, I might put on something really scary, right? Scary is not necessarily an emotion I'd like or want to feel, but watching a scary movie is definitely going to take my attention away from my crisis of feeling really sad. Pushing away means pushing what it is that's distressing you away for a short period of time. It's like metaphorically putting your problem in a box and putting it on a shelf in your closet and saying, I'm not going to think about this right now. I'm going to put it up there for 15 minutes until I can get my bearings, and then I'll return and figure out something else to do with it. Thoughts, do something else with your brain. Do puzzles, do addition, count the tiles in the ceiling, count the colors in the wall, go outside and count the number of birds you see, just something that occupies your thoughts and keeps you from spiraling out of control with your thoughts. And then sensations, do something that elicits a strong sensation in a way that doesn't harm you, to distract from the current crisis. So holding an ice cube in your hand, for example, is an intense sensation. Taking a hot shower, taking a cold shower, doing a cold plunge, those are all intense sensations that get your mind off your crisis. Last skill, I told you that the distress tolerance skills in DBT are subdivided into crisis survival. The other subdivision is reality acceptance. Reality acceptance has to do with this idea of trying to move away from feeling like your life is just one crisis after another, which often has the feeling like you're just putting out fires all the time, but you're not doing very much to prevent the fires from occurring or learning how to live with, heat, right? So reality acceptance is for learning how to accept the reality of the moment, of the world, of the situation. And in particular, in DBT, we talk about the skill of radical acceptance. And this skill is for when you cannot keep painful events and emotions from coming your way. And I like to say, which means pretty much always, and what happens in life. We all need the skill. None of us can keep painful events and emotions from coming our way. And what we often do when painful events and emotions come our way is that we attempt to fight reality. How do we fight reality? By saying, it shouldn't be this way. They shouldn't be this way. I shouldn't feel this way. This shouldn't have happened, right? So obviously me saying all this is a signal to you all that the word should is often, almost always, a sign that we are fighting reality. And what happens if we stop fighting reality is, and we turn towards accepting the moment, is that we will actually become less stressed, and we might see more clearly the world and the situation and these people exactly as they are. And in turn, even though we don't practice acceptance in order to change, what we find is that when we see things more clearly and when we accept them exactly as they are, we may uncover different ways of responding. So, our step by step guide for radical acceptance, and let's do it together right now, if you will, for the next minute, is to identify a problem, situation, person, or aspect of yourself that you have trouble accepting. If you're like me, 100 plus things will immediately come to mind. So just choose one of those things. This is not the time to practice 100 things. We do one thing at a time. Just pick one situation, bring it to mind. And when you think about that situation now, and you think about the should statements you have about that situation now, how does that feel? What does non-acceptance or fighting reality feel like in your body? For me, I feel tension, and it's almost like I feel like a door slams in my head. It's kind of like that, no, can't be that way. No, I don't like it. I don't want it. So it's kind of like that, no, no, no is how I experience non-acceptance. So then to practice radical acceptance, I would say, okay, first we need to adopt an accepting posture. What does that look like? Well, consider opening up yourself, your shoulders, your chest. Lower your shoulders, relax, let the tension out, and consider sitting with your palms face up in your hands on your lap. Palms up is a very, it's more inviting and opening and accepting than closing your palms. So if you have your palms open on your lap, that would be considered a more accepting posture. Now bring this situation to mind again, and as you think about it, consider saying these things to yourself. This situation is exactly as it should be. This could be no other way, given the millions and millions of things that have led up to this moment. This moment, this situation is exactly as it is. And the people in this situation, given the millions and millions and millions of moments that have led to them being the way they are in this moment, could be no other way. They are exactly as they should be too. And then the idea with practicing this would be to sit with that idea, to with an accepting posture, bring these accepting thoughts to your mind. And when your thoughts stray and when you start to say no, or you start to say, can't accept that, that's not true, just notice that and turn away from that and turn towards acceptance again. This is exactly as it is. This is exactly what it is and couldn't be any other way. Okay. It's not easy. By the way, let me just get to that question right away. This is not something that, oh, I just taught you radical acceptance and you're welcome. The rest of your life is going to be amazing. No, radical acceptance is really a skill that comes up on a regular basis, on a daily basis. You can practice radical acceptance when you're stuck in traffic and you think it shouldn't be this way. You can practice radical acceptance when that storm is coming that's going to impact your dinner and you say, this shouldn't be happening. You can practice radical acceptance when contemplating a person in your life who has treated you very poorly, and you can practice radically accepting them as they are. So it can range for what you practice this with, but there is an endless number of things to practice radical acceptance with, and it is very much a lifelong practice, this skill. So not just something that's mastered in a day. And then I just wanted to end, I'll keep this up here, but I highlighted a few resources. This is the YouTube page for the videos. Thank you again for mentioning the book. This is where you can find it. My co-author on this book came up with a game that is a game with DBT skills that if it's not too late, you could buy it and maybe play it at the dinner table for your holiday dinner. And then I have a website where links to all of these things are as well. So yes and no. As I said, distract is not meant to solve the problem, right? It's meant to get through crises and crisis urges without doing anything to make the situation worse. And sometimes if I distract, like let's say my kid does something that I find really annoying. I don't think he can hear me, but I have a 14-year-old boy right now who does a lot of things to drive me crazy. And I really feel like he's purposely trying to drive me crazy. And I'm interacting with him and my emotions are going up, 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 up. And I feel this urge to yell, right? Not perfect, no parent is. I feel the urge to yell. Distract is actually helpful to me because I can say, I'm going to leave the situation. I'm going to go do something else. I'm going to work on my jigsaw puzzle in the other room, which is actually my favorite distract. And I'm going and doing that will allow for my urges to go down. Okay. Now, does this solve the problem of my 14-year-old being a pain in the butt sometimes? No, but actually, it did solve the problem of that moment. And I don't think I needed to do anything else. So I want to say that because I think I don't want distract to seem like it's not a useful skill for people. I think many times it is a very useful skill. And with bigger picture issues, like if I distract every single time I ever interact with my child, then okay, now there's a problem, right? Another kind of problem, which is maybe I need to work on having more, or I know in that case, I would want to work on building more positive interactions or problem solving with him, how we can get things to go differently. So, yes. So it kind of all depends on the circumstances and the situation, I'd say. Yeah, I did a podcast with somebody recently. It was a person in their 20s who runs this podcast and wanted to learn more about DBT. And they said that they got a gift from their parents one year of the DBT for Dummies book. And they were insulted that that was like the gift that they got. And I was like, well, I think DBT is a great gift no matter what. But I think it highlights that, you can't force somebody to do DBT skills if they themselves don't want to do it and aren't interested in learning it at this point. So I would say what I often say, that cliche of like, when the oxygen mask drops, you use it, you put it on yourself before you put it on the miner next to you, is kind of the same way I think about the skills, is that if you have a tough family situation, if you have a family member that really needs, in your opinion, really needs help, but they're not getting the help, you can't force them to be skillful or even to use the skills. And to your point, Doreen, you could practice the skills yourself. You can work on like what would be helpful to you to tolerate the situation that you're in with this family member, which is why I think the model that, DBT for adolescents, what was so groundbreaking about that model when they developed it, when Rathis and Miller developed it, was that they decided they're going to teach the skills to the adolescents because they're in the adolescent program, but also to the parents and of or caregivers of the adolescent in the same group. And the idea was we're not teaching the parents the skills so that they can help their adolescent use the skills. We're teaching the parents the skills so that they can use the skills themselves. And that's what we're talking about here. Right. And this is probably a situation where I would say, it so depends on the circumstance. And I don't want to give advice that I feel like is not, grounded in the reality of any particular situation. But I would say, are there things from this talk that you can take to figuring out what the best approach is for you? And perhaps it is that idea of like um, acceptance or change, or solve the problem, feel better about the problem, accept the problem, or stay miserable? Is there some aspect of that that you can apply to this situation that will help you come to a wiser place? Right? Wise mind is also a skill in DBT. Like, what's the wise mind approach to this? Only you could know what the wise mind approach is to the situation. And if it's not easy, I would say that's important, right? And of course, I just want to say, like, I can appreciate how difficult some of these decisions are for people. Could you sit and try to come to a wise mind place with it to decide how you want to respond to the situation?
Thank you very much. Yeah, I think that's a really good thing to be reminded that these are skills and it's almost like a toolbox. We choose the ones that are most appropriate for each situation, and we have lots to choose from and lots to use together as well. So once again, I want to say thank you so much for sharing your expertise with us, and your love of these skills really shines through. You truly believe in them, and that's so obvious. Thank you so much. Also, just if you have felt that any of the skills that you've learned this evening in this presentation or other ones that you've attended, if you want to support Sashbear in any way, we always welcome donations, and the QR code for our donation page is up on the screen right now. Thank you again for joining us this evening, and thank you so much, Dr. Rizvi, for sharing your expertise with all of
Thank
us.
you.
So much
Thank
appreciated.
you.